students, in this video we'll be focusing on using order of operations to simplify expressions, okay? Both numerical expressions and algebraic expressions. Having said that, here's your heading for today. Please copy this in your notes. Order of operations, lesson 1.2, and be sure and include today's date. For some of you, this might be new information. For some of you, it might be old. And for some of you, you might find this pretty boring, while others find this pretty difficult. But make sure you listen, study, take good notes, and listen to what I have to say, because whatever order of operation problems you did in Algebra 1, these today are going to be much longer, I would assume, and more difficult. Alright, let's go ahead and continue on. Let's review order of operations. Alright, let's go ahead and review that. Alright, let's go ahead and review order of operations. Now, I've heard of PEMDAS. That should be an A right there. And I think it's a great way to teach order of operations. However, personally, I'm not a huge fan of that method, so I will teach it just a little differently. If you don't like the way that I'm about to teach, please feel free to use other methods that other teachers have taught you. That does not bother me one bit. The final goal is for you to understand the math, so use a method you understand the most, okay? Having said all of that, here we go. Let's get started. The first thing I remind students whenever I'm teaching order of operations is to do exponents, roots, and absolute values first. Now, I know technically we should look for parentheses and brackets and set notations, all of that. I get that, okay? But to be honest with you, I kind of look at those as ways in which the problem is divided up into smaller sections, and then we use our order of operations on those sections. I'll explain that later, but right now the first thing I want to remind you is you really should know to do exponents, roots, and absolute values first. This is huge because the number one mistake that students make when we start getting into quadratic expressions is that they multiply two numbers together before they simplify the exponents, okay? Let me show you what I mean, alright? I'm talking about this. A person or a student has a number here, and a number here, and then an exponent here. Well, a lot of students will first multiply 2 times 3 right here and get 6. And then take 6 to the second power and get 36. In fact, a lot of you probably thought when I wrote this problem down right here, that would be the way to do it. And that's not correct. You first simplify your exponents. So here's your exponent right here. Here's your base right here. The 3 is being raised to the second power. So 3 times 3 is 9, okay? Now, the 2 is right next to the parentheses, so it's multiplying. So when you bring your 2 down, you can put a dot if you want. I like to put parentheses myself. So 3 squared is 9. 2 times 9 is 18. Look, you get a totally different answer, okay? You do not multiply these numbers first. You first simplify your exponent, okay? So this is really important that we understand that we need to do exponents, roots, and absolute values first. Here's a bigger, longer problem. Go ahead and copy this down, please, and I will give you a second to do that, alright? Go ahead and copy this down, and then we will work on this together. In fact, I gotta remember, since you do have the videos there, you can pause this whenever you need to. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on. And if you need more time, just pause the video, copy this down, then move on. Now we're doing powers, roots, and absolute values. I see a power here, or an exponent. I see a root here, a square root, and I see an absolute value here. Okay? So let's solve our power first. Bring down my -6. And then 3 to the second power would be 9. Now I put the 9 in parentheses. If you want to put a dot there for multiplication and put a 9, that's totally fine. I prefer parentheses, okay? Because the 6 is right next to the parentheses. So I know the 6 is multiplying the 9. Now bring down your positive 3, then bring down your times, and then your 4, and then stop. We have a root right here. Notice the 4 is right next to the root. That means they're multiplying, okay? So either put a dot here, which is fine, or put parentheses. I prefer parentheses. The square root of 16 is 4. Now bring down your positive 17. Now, here's an absolute value, okay? Remember, absolute values mean make the number positive or leave it positive. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Make the number positive. The absolute value of 5 is 5. Leave the number positive. So an absolute value makes the number positive or it leaves it positive. The number will always come out of an absolute value positive. So I have a negative 2 here. And notice the negative 2 is right next to the absolute value. That means they're multiplying, okay? So you can put a dot for multiplication if you want. I prefer parentheses. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4. Okay? Now I'm not going to go any further. I would like to finish the rest of this problem, but not right now. The main thing I want to show you is learn to go through a problem and do your exponents, roots, and absolute values first, and then we go from there, okay? Now we're going to do some long problems in your homework, and we'll do some in your notes also, okay? But I want you to learn to do those things first. Now, next, I tell students to go through and do all multiplication and division at the same time so that they can see, as they see them going left to right. I would make note of that in your notes. Next, I tell students to go through and do all multiplication and division at the same time as they see them going from left to right. And that's one thing about PEMDAS that I don't really care a lot for is it says multiplication, then division, and really it should be an and right here. It's multiplication and division, and do that as you see the multiplication and division going across. Let me give you an example. Okay, I think that would really help a lot. So if you would please copy this in your notes, and let's simplify this. Okay, now look. The first thing you look for are powers, roots, and absolute values. I don't see any of those. Next, we're going to go through and do all multiplication and division as we see it from left to right. See, a lot of students would think that you would do your multiplication first here. 4 times 3 is 12. And then take 8 divided by 12. That's wrong. You do not do multiplication before division. Neither do you do division before multiplication. You simply go, you start on the left side and you work your way over to the right side and do multiplication and division as you see it. So here we go. I see a division problem here. I'm going to rope that off. Then I see a multiplication problem. Rope that off. So I'm going to bring the 5 down. Now a lot of students see this positive sign and they bring it down. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. It might be positive, but it might be negative. You have to take a positive 8 and divide it by a positive 4. See this 8, it's positive. See this 4, it's positive. So I have a positive 8 divided by a positive 4. That gives me a positive 2. Then bring down your dot, bring down your 3, bring down your negative 6. I did my division first, I got this. Next we'll do the multiplication. Now don't just bring down that positive sign. Do your multiplication and check your signs. It's a positive 2 times a positive 3. I mean, what if this 3 was negative? Then you'd have a positive 2 times a negative 3. That would give you a negative 6. So you wouldn't bring down your positive sign. Now, if you're confused on your signs, feel free to use your calculator. That's fine, okay? okay? I don't mind that, okay? I do not mind that. But I'm just saying, don't just bring down signs. Be careful. Positive 2 times positive 3 is positive 6. And then it's okay to bring this down because it's a negative 6. It's not being multiplied or being added or anything, okay? Alright, so I did my division first. I got this. Then my multiplication got this. Now, 5 plus 6 is 11. 11 minus 6 is 5. Okay, so that's an example of where we're doing our multiplication and division as we see them. Now let's continue on. Obviously, lastly, I tell students to do all addition and subtraction at the same time as they see them going left to right. In other words, you don't necessarily do addition before subtraction or subtraction before addition. It just depends on which one is first, going left to right. Okay? So, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. Now let's address brackets, parentheses, and set notation. Let me give you a problem and we'll work through this together. I'm just going to make one up on a whim, okay? Let's copy this down. Let's put a 5. And then minus, and then a parentheses here, and then 3 times a negative 4. Plus 2, then a bracket, and then 3 parentheses 2 squared. Minus 6 times 2. Okay, now, some of the order of operation problems will have brackets, parentheses, or set notations. Set notations look like this. We've seen these before, okay? We know what those are, alright? Most of the problems won't have those. They might have brackets and parentheses, okay? Now, as I go to simplify this, instead of worrying about doing parentheses first or brackets first, just go to your, if you have a group set aside in parentheses, just go inside there and just simplify that whole thing down to one number, okay? For example, I'm not really worried about doing parentheses first or brackets. I just see this whole problem has been set off here, this part here in parentheses, so I simply bring down my 5. It's okay to bring this negative sign down. It's not attached to a number over here. And then put your parentheses. A positive 3 times a negative 4. A positive 3 times a negative 4. That would be a negative 12. See how I did that? I simplified this group down to one number. Now go to your brackets. Using your order of operations, simplify this down to one number. Now, order of operations. Let's pick this whole thing up here just for a second. Let's see if we can't move this. Not possible, probably. Okay, that's fine. The whole inside of this bracket is this right here. 3 parentheses 2 squared minus 6 times 2. Now, you know what to do first. Exponents, roots, absolute values. I see an exponent right here. So now I have 3 times 4, or you can put a parentheses if you want to. That's what I usually do. 2 squared is 4. Then bring down your negative 6, bring down your positive 2. Now remember, next, we've gotten rid of our exponents. Next we do all multiplication and division. So I see multiplication here. 3 times 4 is 12. I see multiplication here. Be careful, watch your signs. It's a negative 6 times a positive 2. If you're not good with your sign numbers, use your calculator. A negative 6 times a positive 2 is a negative 12. Those cancel, giving you a 0. So this whole thing here simplified down to 0. Alright? Now, be very careful here. I have nothing left inside this parentheses to simplify, nothing inside this bracket to simplify. So now I'm going to do multiple. I look for powers. There's no powers, no absolute values, no roots. So I'm looking for multiplication and division. Whenever a number has what I call a double sign, like this 12 has a negative, it's 5, negative 12. You can treat that like it's multiplication. Okay, let me say that again, and you might want to write that in your notes. Whenever a number has a double sign, 5, negative 12, whenever that happens, treat this as like it's multiplication. A negative times a negative is positive. And if you don't know what a negative times a negative is, use your calculator and it will tell you. So a negative times a negative is a positive. So I'm going to bring down the 5. Negative times a negative is a positive 12. And then I've got multiplication over here. So here's one multiplication problem. Here's the other. Positive 2 times 0 is 0. And now 5 plus 12 is 17. That's a pretty tough problem, okay? Alright. Back this up and watch it again if you're a little confused. Hopefully I've not gone too fast. And we'll practice a lot of these in your homework to give you a lot of practice, okay? Alright, let's finish up the video with 5 quick examples and then we'll be finished, alright? Here we go, example number 1. Okay, well, first of all, I've got some parentheses here, so I'm going to work inside my parentheses and simplify first, okay? So I have a negative 4, and then a positive 2, then a parentheses, negative 2, positive 5. Now, if you struggle with sign numbers, use your calculator. But I'm telling you right now, the best way to simplify signed numbers is to use money. Pretend you owe me $2 and you pay 5. Now you're positive 3 to the good, correct? Negatives mean you owe money. Positives mean you're paying money, paying off debt, or positive means that's money you have in your wallet. So you owe me $2. You pay me 5, so now you're 3 to the good. So a negative 2 plus 5 is 3. Now bring down your exponent. Now we talked about this way back at the beginning of the video. Do you multiply the 2 and the 3 first, or do you do your powers first? Well, the answer is you do your powers first. So I'm going to bring down my negative 4, bring down my positive 2. Notice the 2's right next to the parentheses, so they're multiplying. So I would have 2 times what number here? 9, because 3 squared is 9. Or you can put parentheses if you want to. Okay, so 3 times 3 is 9. Now, what do you do next? Well, you don't add next, you multiply. So negative 4, positive 18. So you owe me $4, you pay 18. So you're now positive 14 to the good. Alright? If I'm going too fast, just pause the video, guys. Nothing wrong with that, okay? If I'm going too fast, pause the video and get caught up. Alright, let's take a look at another problem. Now I see I've got some simplifying here inside the parentheses to do, and some simplifying here inside the parentheses to do. So here we go. You owe me $4. You pay off 2, so you still owe me how much? 2, so a negative 2. Alright, you owe me $2. You pay off 5, so that's 3 to the good. And then bring down your power of 3. Okay, just like the last problem, we're going to multiply these 2 first, or we're going to simplify our exponent first. Well, the answer is exponent, so I'm going to bring down my negative 2. And then put a dot for multiplication, and then 3 to the third power, that's 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. Again, feel free to use your calculator if you want to. So a negative 2 and a positive 27. So I'm multiplying these two numbers. A negative 2 times a positive 27. Well, a negative times a positive is negative, and 2 times 27 is 54. Look at that. The answer is 54. Alright, moving on to number 3. Alright, well, this one's pretty simple. We can do this pretty quickly. I see no powers, roots, or absolute values. I don't see any parentheses or brackets to simplify. So next I'm looking for all multiplication and division as it comes. Well, I don't see any multiplication, but I do see division. 12 divided by 3. Now remember, don't just bring down this negative sign. Check and make sure you have a negative 12 divided by a positive 3. A negative divided by a positive is negative. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And then bring down your negative 7. Okay? So, negative 12 divided by a positive 3 is negative 4. Bring down your 5, bring down your 7. Now, I see that you have a positive $5 in your wallet. However, you owe me 11. You owe me 4, and you owe me 7 more. So you owe me $11. So you owe me 11. You pay off 5, so you still owe me how much? 6. So negative 6. Moving on to number 4. Now we're getting into substituting numbers in for letters, okay? Or for variables, excuse me. So be very careful. I encourage all of my students, when they put a number in, see x equals 2 and y equals negative 3. So where the x is, I'm going to put a 2, and where the y is, I'm going to put a negative 3, okay? Now, I encourage my students to put parentheses where they make substitutions. So here's a 15. Let's see this big parentheses here. I'll put my big parentheses. And then here's my x. So I put a little parentheses, put a 2, then close the parentheses. Then I see a plus sign. Then a little parentheses and put a negative 3. And now we're all set. We can solve this very quickly. Before I do my powers, I better simplify inside the parentheses first, because this 3 goes to the whole parentheses. See this whole big parentheses here? The 3 goes to that whole thing, alright? So, I've got a positive 2 plus a negative 3. A positive 2 plus a negative 3. Okay? Now remember, I told you when a number, or a positive 2, and then a positive negative 3. Whenever a number has 2 signs, we pretend it's multiplication. So I have a positive negative 3. A positive times a negative is negative. And you have a 2, bring down your positive 2. And now you have $2 in your wallet. However, you owe me 3, so you pay off 2. You now owe me negative 1. Alright? So this entire parentheses right here was simplified down to negative 1 to the third power. Alright? Now, okay, sorry about that. Now, this entire parentheses here was simplified down to negative 1. So now I've got negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1, or in other words, negative 1 to the third power. So negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1, okay? Negative 1 to the third power. Well, negative times a negative is positive. Times a negative 1 is negative 1. So negative times a negative is positive 1. Positive 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And if you struggle with that, feel free to use your calculator, okay? So negative 1 to the third power is negative 1. So now I have 15 right next to the parentheses. So times a negative 1. 15 times negative 1 is negative 15, okay? If I'm going too fast, back this up and watch it again, okay? Alright, number 5, last one. And you're going to get a lot of practice in your homework, and that would be good for you, okay? Alright, now, here we go. I'm going to substitute 5 in for r. So here's my problem right here. So I'm going to put a big parentheses right here for these parentheses, and then put an exponent of 2 on the outside. Now inside the parentheses I have 4r. So I have 4, then parentheses for r, and then a 5. Now I've been drilling in your heads to do your powers first. So some of you are thinking, okay, I'm going to take 5 to the second power. Well, be careful. You should see a big difference between this problem here and a problem that looks like this. Do you not see the difference? The 4 is not inside the parentheses with the 5. The 2 is only going to the 5. But over here, the 2 is going to this big parentheses, which means it's going to everything inside. So the first thing you want to do is multiply the 4 and the 5 together, which would give you 20. Then square the 20 and you would get 400. 20 20 times 20. Students, I hope you see the difference between this problem here and this problem here, okay? Here the 5 is in the parentheses all by itself, and over here the 4 and the 5 are in the parentheses together, okay? Really not difficult stuff at all, and I hope this video's been a help to you. If you're struggling, don't worry, keep working, work on the homework, get some practice, and see how you do, okay? Contact me if you have any questions.